There's something about being the only voice awake in a sleeping town that never stops feeling eerie. I have worked this shift long enough to get used to it, or at least pretend to, but some nights remind me why I keep the lights just a little too bright in the studio. The station doesn't help. Valley AM 1310 is a squat cement box of a building off a disused highway spur, nestled between an overgrown field and a chain-link fence that leads nowhere. No neighbors, no streetlights, just the occasional freight truck rumbling past like a half-remembered dream. I took a sip of my cold coffee, the taste flat and bitters, and leaned into the mic. It's 12:03 and you're listening to The Night Shift. I'm Mason Clark, your host in the dark. Call in, talk to me, tell me what keeps you up. A light blinked on the board. Line 2. No name. I pressed the button. You're on with Mason. What's on your mind tonight? Nothing. Static. Then a voice, not quite robotic, not quite human, distorted like it had been dragged through a reel of old magnetic tape. When the static comes, lock your door. Silence. I sat back, blinking. Come again? The line dropped. I stared at the board for a second, then forced a laugh into the mic. Well, that's cryptic. Hope that's not your sleep tip of the night. Anyone else got something less Twilight Zone to share? I cued a vinyl track, some slow ambient jazz, and leaned away. Behind the glass, the studio's on-air light buzzed faintly. The building settled with a metallic groan, the way it always did around midnight. I glanced at the monitor, no new calls. It wasn't the first weird message I'd gotten. Late-night radio attracts all kinds. Pranksters, loners, the genuinely disturbed. But something about this one stuck. The voice didn't sound like a joke. It sounded tired, frightened. I tried to shake it off. The wind outside howled through the seams in the concrete walls. I rubbed my arms. The station was always cold, like it existed a few degrees out of sync with the rest of the world. At 12:47, the static came. It was brief, half a second, a shriek of raw white noise that cut through the jazz mid-note. I flinched. The monitors flickered. Then the music resumed like nothing had happened. I looked at the board. No anomalies, no error lights. That was weird, I muttered. I turned down the track and flipped on the mic. Apologies, folks. Little hiccup in the feed. We're still here, still live. If anyone heard that and wants to weigh in, phone lines are open. No one called. I sat in silence for a while, the low hum of the equipment my only company. Then, 3 soft knocks. I froze. The studio door is solid steel. It locks from the inside. No one else has a key. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the tile. The hallway beyond the studio was dark. I pulled out my phone and used the flashlight. I reached the door, pressed my ear to it. Nothing. I opened it. Empty hallway. I checked the lobby. The front door was still locked. The security lights hadn't tripped. Everything looked normal. Back in the studio, the on-air light still glowed. Mic still live. I sat back down and tried to steady my breathing. All right, I said, my voice low. Either someone's pulling a pretty elaborate prank, or I need to cut back on caffeine. The laugh I tried didn't sound convincing, not even to me. The rest of the show passed uneventfully. A few regulars called in, a woman with insomnia, a guy rambling about the moon looking wrong, the usual. At 3 a.m., I signed off and cued the overnight playlist. I lingered longer than I normally do, letting the first track, something minimalist and droning, fill the room. It made the silence less obvious. Before I left, I glanced at the call log. Line 2, 12:03 a.m. No number, no trace. Outside, my car was cold. The field across the road rippled in the wind like something had just moved through it. I told myself not to look too long. I told myself not to listen too hard. Tomorrow would be a normal night. It had to be. There's a rhythm to this job that I usually rely on, a kind of quiet mental glide that gets me from midnight to 3 a.m. without thinking too much about the shadows. But the night after the call, the one with the voice and the warning about the static, that rhythm didn't come. Everything felt off, like I was walking into a room I'd been in 100 times before and suddenly couldn't remember where the light switch was. The station felt colder than usual, not temperature-wise, though it always ran on the wrong side of comfortable, but something deeper. It was like the air had weight, like something was pressing in from the corners, watching me through the flickering fluorescence. Still, I went through the motions. I unlocked the door, powered up the board, ran the levels. I even made fresh coffee, though I barely touched it. I told myself it was just a prank. A good one, sure. Convincing, but a prank all the same. Radio attracts that kind of thing. "Welcome back to the night shift," I said at 12:01 a.m., trying to inject the usual warmth into my voice. "I'm Mason Clark, your insomnia companion and fellow nocturnal. Lines are open. Tell me what's keeping you up." For a while, it was almost normal. A guy from out near Morrow called in about hearing wolves in the woods again. He always called when the moon was full. A nurse on break talked about hospital elevator music being creepier than any horror movie. I nodded along, smiled when I was supposed to, tried to feel grounded. Then, at 12:38, the static came back. Just a flash of it. Sharp, wrong. A rising squeal that cracked through the speakers and bled out into the air like a siren underwater. "Jesus!" I muttered, yanking my headphones off. The board didn't show anything. No spike, no warning light. The track playing didn't skip, but I knew what I heard. Quick tech hiccup, folks," I said into the mic. "Nothing to worry about. If anyone heard that, let me know. Could use a second opinion." The phone rang almost instantly. Line 1. I picked up. "Hey, you're on the air." Heavy breathing, then a woman's voice, barely a whisper. It happened here too. The static. I thought it was just my TV. Then the lights flickered, and I heard someone outside. She broke off. There was a long silence. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Where are you calling from?" She didn't answer. The line went dead. A chill slid down my spine. My finger hovered over the call log button, but when I pressed it, there was no number, no record of the call at all. I sat back, trying to slow my breathing. The low hum of the station was suddenly deafening. The walls seemed tighter, closer, like the room had shrunk when I wasn't looking. Then line 2 lit up. I stared at it. The last time line 2 lit up, I got the warning. I pressed the button. "You're on with Mason." More static. But this time, it wasn't random. It had a cadence, a beat, like something trying to form words but not quite getting there. Then a voice, barely audible under the noise. "Don't let it in." I swallowed hard. Let what in? Who is this? Nothing. Just the sound of wind and a faint rhythmic tapping, like fingernails on a window pane. I ended the call. I didn't take any more for the next 20 minutes. Just played music, let the auto cue take over. I sat there, staring at the board, watching for any flicker, any spike. Then I remembered the archives. In the back room, there's an old shelf stacked with reel-to-reel tapes, stuff from the station's early days. Most of it's garbage, local weather from 1985, agricultural reports, ball games. But I remembered something Dave, our old engineer, once told me before he left. Weird crap lives in the archives. I swear one of those tapes recorded something it shouldn't have. It felt stupid, but I needed to do something. I pulled out a few unlabeled reels, loaded one up on the old machine. Static, mostly. Garbled voices. Then, on the third tape, a voice. "This is Valley AM 1310, time is 12:03 a.m. My voice, except I'd never recorded that. "When the static comes," it said, clear as day, "lock your door." I backed away from the machine, heart pounding. It had to be a coincidence. An old promo? Some forgotten bit Dave spliced together as a joke? But the tone, the cadence. It was exactly what I heard last night. Exactly. I shut off the tape. The room felt wrong, the shadows sharper. I suddenly wanted to be anywhere else. That night, I didn't sign off the usual way. I just let the autoplay roll and left the studio early. As I stepped into the parking lot, I looked up at the signal tower silhouetted against the moon. It was humming, not the usual electrical buzz. It was humming in rhythm, like it was waiting. By the time I got back to the station the next night, My nerves were already frayed. I hadn't slept well. Every time I drifted off, I'd jolt awake with the impression that someone was whispering just outside the window. I live alone in a second-floor apartment. There's no balcony. I told myself I was being dramatic, sleep-deprived, imaginative, all the things a guy who talks to strangers on late-night radio is bound to be. But that didn't stop me from double-locking my door and leaving a light on in every room. The station looked normal, if you could call that concrete box normal. The signal tower hummed faintly as I walked past it. Nothing unusual, but now it felt like background music in a horror movie, like something letting me know it was still there. I unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and felt that same invisible weight settle on my shoulders, the kind of pressure that made your ears pop, like I was too deep underwater. I ran checks on the board like always, tested the lines, sipped at the same stale coffee I always regretted making. Everything was in place, but the second I went live, I knew the night was going to be different. You're listening to The Night Shift on Valley AM 1310. I'm Mason Clark, and I hope you're not too comfortable, because tonight might not be as quiet as usual. I meant it as a joke. It didn't sound like one. The first hour passed with normal calls, but I couldn't relax. I kept catching movement out of the corner of my eye, only to find nothing there. The phone lines buzzed irregularly, blinking once or twice and then going dead. The overhead lights flickered every 15 minutes like clockwork. At 1:12 a.m., line 1 lit up. "You're on the air," I said. No breathing, no background noise, just silence. Then, finally, a voice. It was my voice. "Mason," it said, "they know who you are now." I stared at the console, hand frozen. "Who is this?" I asked. "How did you do that?" A pause. Then the line clicked dead. I checked the log. No number. Of course. I leaned back, heart pounding. The studio suddenly felt smaller. I could hear the low hum of the transmitter behind the walls, like a massive heartbeat pulsing through concrete. At 1:29, line 2 blinked. I didn't want to answer. I did anyway. "Go ahead, you're live." This time, it was a woman. "I heard you yesterday," she said. Her voice trembled. "That wasn't a recording. That was you, right?" "Excuse me?" At 4:15, I turned on the radio. You were talking, but you weren't. You weren't saying anything that made sense. You were just listing things, names, places, numbers, over and over, like someone was making you read it. My throat went dry. I didn't work past 3 a.m. The station ran automated feeds until sunrise. "Are you sure it was me?" I asked. "Yes, I recorded it. I can send it to you." "Please do." She gave me her name and email. I barely managed to write it down before the line cut. I pulled out my phone and checked the station's stream logs. Nothing at 4:15 a.m. The system showed pre-scheduled jazz with no interruptions. But someone heard me, or something pretending to be me. The rest of the show blurred past me. I kept looking at the door, expecting it to open on its own. Every flicker of static between tracks made me jump. At 2:58, just before my sign-off, the board flashed once. All the lines lit up at once. 5 blinking lights. No names, no caller ID. I didn't touch them, I just stared. They went dark, and then the mic turned on. I hadn't touched it. The red light flared to life. I froze. A voice came through the speakers. Mine again, but not from my mouth. "Stop looking for answers. You won't like what sees you back." Then silence. The mic light turned off. I left the station without shutting anything down. Drove home with the radio off, the windows up. I checked the back seat 3 times at red lights. When I finally walked through my apartment door, my phone buzzed. 1 new email. Subject line, "Your voice at 4:15. Attached, an audio file. I played it. The voice was mine, but the words weren't. I didn't listen to the recording right away. The email sat in my inbox like it was radioactive. I stared at the subject line. Oof. Your voice at 4:15, for what felt like an hour. The sender's name was just a first name and some numbers, and the file was a clean .mp3 with no description. I hovered over it, finger trembling, then closed my laptop. Not yet, not while I was alone. Instead, I went for a walk around the block, tried to breathe. The air was sharp with frost, the streetlights haloed in mist. It was so quiet I could hear my own footsteps echoing back at me like someone was following just behind. I kept turning around. Nothing. Just my shadow, stretching long and thin beneath the lamps. By the time I got back, my mind had softened a little. I told myself it was probably a hoax. Maybe someone with editing skills. Maybe an old clip they spliced together. Some eager listener looking to scare me. That happens sometimes. People get obsessed with radio voices. They think they know you. They want to be part of the story. I waited until the next night before I finally played it. I was already at the station when I did. Figured if something went wrong, at least I wouldn't be alone in my apartment. I sat down in the studio just before midnight and the overhead fluorescents humming above me and slipped in my earbuds. The file was only 2 minutes long. It started with soft static, then my voice. Not like I usually sound. There was something flat in it, like I was reading off a list. Cedar Hill, 43, Delta Echo 7, Brenda, Glass, red door, red door, red door. I listened to the whole thing twice. I didn't remember saying any of it. The voice was mine, no doubt about it, but the rhythm was wrong, like I was in a trance. The static returned at the end, slowly overtaking the words until it was all I could hear. Then, something new. A whisper, right at the tail end, buried in the static. Just one word. Listen. I yanked the earbuds out. I started the night's broadcast in a fog. I told myself to stay professional, but it felt like I was being watched. Not just in the usual paranoid sense. Something about the room felt occupied, like I was no longer the only one using the mic. You're tuned into the night shift on Valley AM 1310, I said, at 12:01 a.m., my voice dry. If you're out there and still awake, I'd love to know what you're hearing tonight. The lines were quiet for a while. I played 2 songs in a row. Just when I thought the show might be mercifully uneventful, line 1 lit up. I answered, a man's voice, unfamiliar and urgent. I heard the tape too, the one with your voice, but mine was different. What do you mean? Different words, different names, but it was still you, still your voice. Are there more of them? My stomach dropped. You received a file like that? When? Yesterday, from someone anonymous. No subject, just the file. It started playing on its own. I didn't even open it. I sat in silence. My skin felt too tight. Mine ended with a knock, he said, then hung up. I stared at the console. Then the knock came. 3 slow, heavy knocks. I stood. The studio door was shut, locked. I walked toward it, step by cautious step, holding my breath. I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. But the air felt different, charged, like something was on the other side, not moving, not breathing, just waiting. I backed away and returned to the mic, heart hammering. I tried to pivot the show back to normal. Played a track. Let the music fill the space. At 2:07 a.m., I noticed something strange. The recording indicator was on. I hadn't hit record. I opened the file directory. A new file was being created in real time. Night shift auto 2:07 a.m. .wav. I clicked on the file mid-recording. It was me, my voice. They come through the static. Don't let them talk. If you hear yourself, hang up. I wasn't saying that. My mouth wasn't moving, but my voice was speaking. I shut the file, ejected the drive. The air in the studio was buzzing now, like the station was breathing through the wires. I didn't finish the show that night. I left everything running and walked out into the cold. In the distance, the signal tower blinked, once, twice, then it went dark. I didn't go home after the tower went dark. I just sat in my car across the road, engine off, hands wrapped around a cup of gas station coffee that had gone cold before I even stepped outside. I watched the building, watched the tower, watched the empty air for signs that something, anything, was still awake in there. It didn't blink again. By sunrise, I still hadn't moved. The sky went from black to blue to a dull, indifferent gray. I couldn't stop thinking about what the voice said. If you hear yourself, hang up. What happens if you don't? I started the car and drove, not home, just away. Highway lines blurred under my tires until my brain felt static washed. I pulled over at some anonymous rest stop with vending machines and dead insects on the fluorescents. I sat on the curb and played the file again, the one with my voice that I didn't remember recording. The words didn't change, but I noticed something I hadn't caught before. In the background, under the static, there were other voices, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all whispering in sync. Not quite words, but shapes of words, like something trying to speak a language it had only heard once. I didn't sleep. I barely blinked. The next night, I went back to the station. Everything inside was exactly as I left it. The board was on. The recording light still flickered, though nothing was being saved. A faint, high-pitched whine echoed from the speakers even when the volume was muted. At midnight, I didn't start the show. I just sat in the chair, mic off, headphones around my neck, staring at the clock. 12:01, 12:02, 12:03. The static came, not loud, not sharp, just a low, rolling hiss that filled every corner of the room like fog. I didn't flinch this time. I just listened. Then a voice, my voice. It's too late to lock the door. The mic light turned on by itself. I didn't touch anything. Mason Clark is no longer available, the voice said through the speakers, but we're still here. We're always here. The lights flickered, the air shifted, and I understood. It had never been about me. The static was a signal, sure, but it wasn't sent from anywhere. It was pulling, drawing people in, using familiar voices to lure them closer, a trap disguised as a broadcast. I reached for the mic. My hand trembled. If you're listening, I said, don't answer the phone, don't play the file, don't let the voice talk, it's not. The power cut. Everything went dark, but only for a second. When the lights returned, the studio was wrong, not broken, not vandalized, just shifted, every angle a little off, the corners too sharp, the shadows too still. The mic light was on again. I looked at the board. The show was live, and the voice coming through the speakers wasn't mine anymore. It sounded like a child, a woman, a dozen people all speaking at once. We see you now. I reached for the power button. The screen displayed a prompt, do not sign off. I backed away, and then I did the only thing I could think of. I sat down, I leaned into the mic, and I started talking. Not to the thing, to whoever was still out there. Anyone with a radio tuned too far to the left, anyone who still believed that silence was just silence. I told them what had happened. I told them everything. Because I knew what the static wanted. It didn't just want to speak. It wanted to be heard. And if I stopped talking, if the show ever truly ended, it would start broadcasting on its own. So here I am, still live, still talking. And if you're hearing this, lock your door, please, before it says your name.